The Shadow Club, Chapter 3, The Fire and the Agony. People were milling around the phys ed bulletin board before classes. Ours wasn't the only team choosing captains that day, and everyone there waited impatiently for each coach to put up the results. I wasn't one of the kids waiting. Sure, I wanted to be captain, but I didn't want to think about it. The more I thought about it, the more worried I would get, and I'd feel miserable until the results went up. It was better to think about anything else until then. I thought about my new teachers, my old friends, what I would have for lunch, anything but the track team and Austin Pace and his $1 million aeropeds that never got dirty and looked like they came from planet Krypton or something like that. I wandered around a bit before the homeroom bell rang, looking for people I hadn't seen the day before. People really do change in one summer. Charlie Garcia had grown like 6 inches since June, and half of everyone I knew seemed to have gotten rid of their braces. I talked to Ralphie Sherman, who said that he made a movie in Hollywood over the summer. Ralphie was always good for a laugh because he never uttered a word of truth in his entire life. Pretty soon I forgot all about the track team and was in a good mood. Such a good mood that I even said hello to Tyson McGaw. He grunted back and then 5 minutes later got himself into a fight with some kid whose name I don't remember. Watching Tyson get into fights was a school tradition. Personally, I never got into a real fight with him. Like I said before, Tyson fought like an animal, and I wanted nothing to do with that. Just looking at him, you could tell that something wasn't quite right. His eyes were kind of far away, like he wasn't seeing you, and his stringy, matted hair was just plain ugly. It seemed no amount of combing could help that. Tyson was definitely not a mother's dream. Mr. Green saw the fight and ran down the hall. Mr. Green was a vice principal and doubled as the school guidance counselor, which must have been a tough job since so many kids go wacko during junior high. After Mr. Green had broke up the fight, which wasn't much of a fight, it was more like Tyson doing an impersonation of the Tasmanian devil, everyone in the hall began to applaud and laugh at Tyson as he continued struggling with Green. I have to admit, I laughed a little too. Like I said, it was a school tradition. Mr. Green held him as he struggled, and then Tyson turned to Green and screamed out a whole lot of words I don't want to hear and started breathing like a bull ready to charge. "You know what he did?" he screamed at Green. "What did he do, Tyson?" "He called me a slime ball." I laughed right away. I just couldn't help it. It was the way he said it, with all that anger in his voice, long and drawn out. "Slime ball." Everyone laughed, but I guess I must have laughed the loudest because Tyson broke away from Green and stomped up to me. "You think that's funny, huh?" he yelled, almost ready to pull back his fist and hit me. "You touch me, Tyson, and I swear I'll flatten you. I'll hang you by your toenails over a bear trap." That one really sent him for a loop. He looked at me with those weird eyes, trying to figure out how that would feel. For a split second, I felt bad for him. Here he was, a thin, nutty kid in a frenzy, and everyone was laughing at him. He must have felt terrible. I almost felt like saying, "It's okay, Tyson, you're not a slime ball. Take it easy," just to make him feel better. But then everyone around me began to laugh even harder, and Tyson stormed off. Green gave me this dirty look that said, "Bear trap? I'll give you a bear trap." Bang, boom, and ran after Tyson. Yeah, school was the same as ever. As the homeroom bell rang, I heard a voice behind me. "Jared, I'd like to speak with you for a minute." I recognized the voice right away. I turned to see Coach Schuler. You know that feeling you get when you think something great is going to happen and your heart misses a beat and you get shivers down your spine? Well, that's what I felt just then. Why would Coach Schuler pull me aside to talk to me unless he had good news for me about the captaincy? "Hi, Coach, what's up?" I said cheerfully. "You got a minute?" "Yeah." "Great. Why don't you come into my office?" I followed him down the hall and into the gym, where it was much quieter. Our footsteps echoed in the huge, empty gym as we crossed it, It was cold, and the air had the sour smell of the floor varnish. We went into the gym office. "Have a seat," he said. Then he picked up his clipboard and began to look at it. He sat in the other chair behind the desk. "I totaled up the results." "Yeah?" I said, trying to sound like I didn't really care. "It was pretty close." "Yeah?" He looked up from his clipboard. I really couldn't read his expression. He had a poker face, I guess. You could never tell what was in his head. He stalled, keeping me in suspense. I didn't have a poker face. I knew all the expectation was in my eyes. In my lap, I had my fingers crossed so hard my knuckles were turning white. You didn't get it, Jared. I'm sorry." At first, it was like I didn't quite hear him. My fingers were still crossed, as if crossing them could change what he had said. I still held my breath, but then what my ears had heard made its way into my brain. You know that sinking feeling, the kind you get about 10 seconds before you realize that you're going to throw up? Well, I didn't feel like I was going to throw up, but that sinking feeling stayed around for a long time. Before I went into his office, I'd been prepared to lose, but then he called me in, and I was sure that I had won. Why couldn't he have just let me find out when he posted it? I could have handled that. It wouldn't have been so bad. I would have just looked and walked away. But now he had gotten my hopes up, and I couldn't just walk away. I had to sit there and feel lousy. "Like I said," continued the coach, "it was a close race. You and Austin were neck and neck all the way." He began to fiddle with his clipboard. If it wasn't his clipboard, it was his whistle. If it wasn't his whistle, it was his glasses. He always fiddled with something. "Listen, I know how much you wanted to be captain, and because of all your hard work, I'm going to make you a very special offer. As runner-up, you are entitled to something very special. So I'm making you assistant coach." "Assistant coach?" I said. "It might not sound so bad to you, but you have to understand that assistant coach was a position usually given to some younger kid who was not a good enough runner to be on the team. He might as well have told me I was team mascot. Assistant coach. Yeah, that's right." "Well, what do I get to do?" "Take attendance, get equipment, stuff like that." Well, what was I supposed to say to that? Austin gets all the glory and power of being team captain, and I get to take attendance. I tried to be enthusiastic, but I just couldn't, and the coach could see it in my eyes. I didn't have a poker face. "Thanks," I said. "You don't seem too happy about it." "No, I'm happy. I'm just a little upset about not being captain, that's all." "Sure, I understand. You can hang around for a few minutes if you like. I'll give you a late pass for homeroom." "No, it's okay." I'm sure he could tell by my voice that it wasn't okay. I didn't have a poker voice either. "Listen, there's always high school." "Right," I said, silently thinking how Lost in Space would win again when we were seniors in high school. "Thanks," I said. "It was the least I could do. You're a good kid, Jared. I feel bad for you." "No, don't feel bad for me. I don't want you feeling bad for me." "Well, I mean that I think sometimes life gives people the short end of the stick, and I think you deserve more." "Thanks," I said, for the 1200th time. "I'll see you this afternoon?" "Yeah. Be early so you can take attendance." The hall was empty when I left the gym, except for one kid. None other than Lost in Space himself was standing outside the gym doors. He was waiting for me. It wasn't a coincidence. "Oh, so you spoke to the coach already, huh?" "Yeah." "So he told you I won?" "How'd you already know?" "No, he spoke to me first. You don't think he'd tell you before he told me, do you?" Austin waited for an answer, but I didn't give him one. "I'll bet you like being the team secretary." "Assistant coach." "Now, it really is team secretary. Hey, I'll make sure to give you lots of memos to type. Maybe you can come over to my house sometime and answer some phones." I turned and walked down the hall. He followed, his aeropeds gliding across the floor. I wanted to step on them and leave nice gray tread marks on the snow-white leather toes. It's not secretary." "All right, gopher then." I stopped. "What?" "You know, gopher. Hey, Jared, go for this. Hey, Jared, go for that. Hey, Jared, gopher, gopher, gopher." I just scowled at him. He saw the anger in my unpoker face and laughed. "Just kidding," he said in the nastiest, most obnoxious tone a person could come up with. Then he laughed harder and turned away, his arrowheads bouncing off down the hallway, squeaking on the floor. I felt more humiliated than I'd felt in a long time as I walked down the hall. It wasn't the fact that I was assistant coach that bothered me. It was the fact that Austin knew first, and as usual made fun of me, calling me gopher. It was bad enough to feel hidden in his shadow, but to be humiliated? Well, that was something else. He was twisting the knife. How would I feel if Austin Pace had never been born? Let's not talk about it. The alarm went off at 1:30. That's right, you guessed it, another school fire. I can't say I wasn't glad to hear the alarm bell. I hadn't been able to concentrate all day because of what had happened that morning. At least now I could feel angry without having to pay attention to teachers at the same time. It used to be nobody raised much of a fuss when the fire alarm went off. The teachers would just get the class up and funnel them in an orderly manner down the stairway and out onto the field. Now it was much quicker and much more serious. It used to be they were all drills or false alarms, but last year there were 3 real fires. The last one burned down the gym. Now, as we marched into the hall, I could swear I already smelled smoke. The scene out in the field was much more chaotic than any of the teachers could stand for. Kids were running in the field, and the neat little rows of classes were breaking down into mobs of kids, a good many of them pressing up against the fence to see the smoke pouring out of the cafeteria. It wasn't a whole lot of smoke, but it was enough to cause a commotion. I didn't really care to watch the fire. I had my own problems to think about. If I sound heartless, it isn't because I didn't care about anyone left in the school. I'd overheard the principal say that the school had been cleared and there was nothing to worry about, except for the cafeteria burning down, which, believe me, is exactly what the cafeteria deserved. While the cafeteria smoked, I fumed, still filled with the anger Austin had put in me that morning. "I don't want to talk about it," I told Cheryl when she asked me about the track team. She knew exactly what I meant when I said, "And don't ask again." "Well, join the club." "Why? What's wrong with you?" "Oh, nothing. It's just that the play they're doing this year is Annie." So, guess what snotty little brat is absolutely perfect for the role? Rebecca's trying out? I don't even think she has to. They'll just look at her and give her the role. Cheryl continued to complain at me about Rebecca and other things. I turned to look at the school. The firefighters were standing by the fire truck doing nothing in particular, which meant that the fire was not a big one and had been put out right away. The cafeteria had been saved, although it would probably smell like smoke for the rest of the year. We all knew there would be no more school that day, not till they were positive that there was no fire left and the building had a chance to air out. Still, they couldn't let us go home until 3, so the schoolyard began to resemble a junior high school riot, with kids playing all sorts of unruly games that made the teachers all start pulling out their hair. "A club?" said Cheryl. "Huh?" I asked, not having heard her. "I said we should form a club of all the kids who are second best." I laughed. "Yeah, right, and one by one do away with everyone in our way. Mwahahaha!" "No, I'm serious. We could have a club just for fun, something that only we could have, and none of the unbeatable kids could be in it. A second best club." "That's a stupid idea." "No, it's not. We could all go and do things and have fun and really make the unbeatable kids jealous that we thought of it before they did. We'll be one up on them for a change." "Yeah? Who would be in this club?" "I don't know. We'd have to think about it for a while. Come up with some names. I'll bet there are lots of kids who'd want to be in it. My brother, for instance. Nobody else will want to do it. They're going to laugh at us. But if they don't, Jared, we could be starting something big. A secret club that'll go on for years after we've gone on to high school. I thought about this. Cheryl always had a way of convincing me of things, but this time she wasn't the one who convinced me. It was someone else. "Hey, Jared!" someone called. It was that familiar voice, a voice I didn't want to hear. I could almost see those arrowheads and that red hair and those long, bony arms. "Hey, Jared, want a race?" First race of the season. So this was it. The challenge. Austin was always the one to challenge first. Usually he waited until the second week of school, when he had seen me run and was absolutely sure he'd be able to beat me. This time he asked on the second day, and there were too many kids around for me to turn down the challenge. "Don't you think it'd be better if we waited until the field was clear?" I said. "Isn't this clear enough?" I turned around. Sure enough, the field was clear enough to race. Austin had come over with about 10 kids, and more kids were joining us because everyone knew what he was up to and everyone knew about our rivalry. Maybe we should wait until your legs grow some more," he said. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. Better be laughed with than laughed at, right? Inside, I wasn't laughing though. "Fine, then," I said. "Right now." Austin smiled, that crocodile smile. "Greg, hey, go about 60 yards and judge us." Greg Miller, one of the new 7th graders on the team, obeyed as if he'd been given an order by God. So this is where it begins, I thought. This year's competition, this year's war. I felt strong. I felt ready to run. I felt like I always felt when I raced with Austin, that maybe this time I would beat him. We got down into starting position, then Austin got up. "Wait," he said, and he took off his precious shoes, then his socks. He was going to run barefoot. "Okay." He got back down. "You ready to lose?" he asked. I didn't answer. Martin Bricker got ready to start us as more and more kids turned to watch. Even teachers were watching. So this is where it begins. "On your mark. Get set. Go!" I took off like a bullet, cutting through the wind and pounding the grass with every last bit of my strength. I didn't turn to look, but I could see in the corner of my eye that we were neck and neck. 10 yards were gone. I looked toward Greg down the field and concentrated on turning everything I had into power. "This is for every time you beat me in races as a kid." I pushed harder. "And this is for when you came back to do it again last year." I pushed harder. "And this is for how you made me feel this morning." I pushed harder. We were still neck and neck. 30 yards were gone, 30 to go. The cheers faded away behind us. "And this is for challenging me in front of the whole school. And this is for everything you'll ever try to do to me for the rest of our lives. And this is for those stupid running shoes you wear." 40 yards gone. I was ahead of him by a foot. I was beating him. I pushed harder. 15 yards to go. 15 to go. And then, like he'd been holding it all back, he flew out in front of me. He didn't inch out. He flew out, like I was standing still. He moved like a machine and fast forward, a ship blasting into hyperspace. He was a foot in front of me, 2 feet, 3 feet. He turned to look at me and smiled, that awful smile of his. I lunged. I dove forward in a wild attempt to reach the finish line before he did, but he was there before I hit the ground. I was moving so fast that I skidded along the grass, skinning my elbows and ruining my pants. The agony of defeat. I felt like that skier who wipes out on the ski jump every Sunday on Wide World of Sports. The agony of defeat, skinned elbows and ruined pants, and a laughing, lost in space. By now, kids were crowding around Austin. "Wow, did you see Austin take off? Wow, he really beat him bad. Wow, Austin is so fast. Wow this and wow that. Austin was loving every last bit of it. They crowded around him and left me there on the ground to examine my elbows. "You shouldn't race Austin, kid," said a seventh grader. "Austin beats everybody." Austin looked down at me. He was barely winded. "You ran pretty good." "For a gopher," he said, and everyone laughed. "Gopher," they all said. "Gopher, gopher, gopher." And then Austin raised his hands to conduct them as they all chanted in unison, "Gopher, gopher, gopher," over and over again. I could have killed him. I could have ripped him limb from limb. But then I thought about Tyson McGaw. No, I wasn't Tyson. I was civilized, and I wasn't going to attack Austin. Instead, I stood up, brushed myself off, and waited till the gopher chanting stopped. Then I looked Austin straight in the face, and I put out my hand. "Nice race, Austin." I shook his hand. Let me tell you, it took all of my strength to do it, too. "Yeah," he said. "See you around, gopher." I turned and left while everyone crowded around Austin. My elbows had just begun hurting. Cheryl was there waiting for me. That's one thing about her. She was always there. She never laughed at me either. "Are you okay?" she asked. I looked back toward Austin and turned to Cheryl and asked, "So, what are we going to call our club?"